Hello, and welcome to Tankgewehr Reloading Part 2. Hopefully you've watched Part 1 of this series. If not, I recommend you pause this and go ahead and look that one up and then come back when you're done. But a quick recap: in Part 1, we learned how to cut, anneal, and reshape 50 BMG brass so that it chambers in the 13mm Tankgewehr, and then load those rounds into blank cartridges for the purposes of fire forming. Now, that first attempt went very well. Tried out various loads, everywhere from 80 grains to 175 grains of MagPro powder, and all of them successfully fire formed the cases. Um, so now we got a good batch of cases that are fire formed to the chamber. Here's an example of one right here. So that's good. It's great, looks good, but then that also introduces a whole new set of challenges and problems and things, especially if you're doing what I'm doing and basically making these by hand without proper, full reloading equipment. To my knowledge, right now there's only one entity that actually makes 13mm dies. They're $1,000, and oh hi, how's it going? Looks like we got a little friend here. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Anyways, there's $1,000. Probably worth it, because if you're playing with these, you could probably afford it. But at the same time, if you don't need to do it, why bother? So, what I did instead, a little bit ramshackle, but it works. With the 13mm case dimensions, as mentioned in the previous video, the shoulder and the neck are completely different than the 50 BMG. So if you have something like your 50 BMG reloading dies, they don't work with that. So I came up with a method where I take this guy here and I mount this in the top of the reloading press, because you can take the bushing out and have the wider threads there to fit that. Take standard 50 BMG shell holder, and then I take the 50 BMG capper and I just wedge that guy in there. And so that mounts at the bottom part of the press with the lever rammer. And anyways, I have a second shell holder for 50 BMG that I just leave like normal. And so first things first, I'll actually take that spare shell holder, mount that in the top, put the fire formed case in there, take this steel ice pick, and with the ice pick you get this nice little point at the end, and it's got a good long shaft to it, and I'll literally fit that down the top of the case, and it'll perfectly drop into the primer cavity, because since these rounds are so large, it's very generous. And again, because the dimensions are different, you can't just take like a 50 BMG decapper to decap the fire formed rounds. But you drop that ice pick in there and then just whack the top with a hammer once or twice, and that primer will pop right out, no problem. Once that's done, you mount this guy in the top bushing, and then you've already got this on your bottom rammer. It can just live there. And so that's how you're going to prime the case. You're going to put your 50 BMG primer in there and ram it home. Now, what I found on my first attempt at doing this is, because this is still a 50 BMG part, when the case was rammed, I don't know how else it's going to show up on camera, but it basically did a second shoulder right at the top of the cartridge, down about 1 millimeter. And that has to do with the 50 BMG, that steep neck angle. And then that's kind of no good, because it ruins the whole point of fire forming. That's actually why I reloaded this one as a blank cartridge. It's basically going to get fire formed a second time. But I very quickly found a fix for that, Get this 3-ounce galvanized bolt, and you can drop that right in the top. And then because the top of that bolt flares out on the sides, it'll actually stop in here right at that shoulder. So it'll keep the case from being pushed up and reforming it. And it'll allow you to get a nice rigid lockup. So then when you ram the new primer in there, it will actually seat flush like it's supposed to, and not mess with the neck of the cartridge at all, or the mouth of the case. So, you know, that's a little bit of a roundabout way of doing things, but for me, I'd rather spend $1.29 on a 3-ounce bolt from the hardware store than $1,000 on getting a proper die setup. The secondary issue there, at least for me, is because I don't like working with melting lead. I have not cast actual 13.2 millimeter projectiles yet. I have some ideas for doing that in the future, but I haven't gotten there quite yet. So instead, excuse you, you can go 5 minutes without attention, get out of here. So instead, what I did was I went to the local reloading shop and acquired a box of these. It was the largest diameter bullet they had in stock. It's a 504 Gibbs. So it's still undersized because the 13 millimeter TUF is a 525 diameter. And this one's also only like, I think it's 500 grain ish, maybe 520 grain bullet, whereas an actual 13 millimeter projectile is going to be like 750 grains or something like that. So it's a little light and it's a little small. But spoiler alert, if you haven't already watched some of the videos of me shooting the Tankgewehr, I was doing my test fires at an indoor range. So it was also kind of important for me to use a, you know, it's painted lead or whatever, but use a soft lead, you know, nice and light bullet, so that I wouldn't damage their backstop. Because yeah, their backstop's rated for 50 BMG, so don't really want to push the limits of that by going all out and trying to like do an actual replica military load. And obviously anything with steel content would be strictly forbidden. So anyways, so we got our 504 Gibbs, and then the other things that we have here, we got some cotton balls from the dollar store, and there's some generic cotton cloth cleaning patches. So going back to our Fireform case here, it's Fireform for 13 millimeter, but like I just said, our bullets, our projectiles are undersized. So, you know, a couple of challenges there. So first off, with the powder load, I stuck with, for the first batch, I stuck with the same that I did with the first batch of blanks, and I did 175 grains of MagPro. Second batch, I'm going to increase that slightly with 188 grains, but that's still underloaded from even what a 50 BMG would be. So it'll still be nice and indoor range safe, but plenty of big boom, and you'll still get to feel some good recoil and all that fun stuff. So it's still enjoyable to shoot. The cotton balls, these, whenever I reload, especially with larger cases, and old antique black powdery type stuff, but then especially with these big boys, I take these cotton balls and I pull them apart, and then I shove the bits in the case after I've loaded the powder to help fill up the extra space. The reason for that is when you have a case, especially a large one, and a lot of powder in there, when it's loaded in the gun, it's going to be on its, you know, it's probably going to be horizontal, right? So then all that powder is going to rest on the bottom of the case. And if you're doing a light load, which even though there's a lot of powder in these, they're still technically a light load, or if you're shooting, an antique black powder gun like a Trapdoor Springfield or Remington Keen, Chaffee Reese, Winchester Hotchkiss, anything like that, you want to run light loads in them because they're antique. The steel's old, it's the strength of it's degraded, and especially if you're shooting a smokeless powder in a black powder gun. There are some ways to do that safely, but you got to be really light on your powder regardless, because they weren't built to handle those pressure levels. So anyways, with a light loaded case, you run the risk that all your powder will be sitting here on the base of the cartridge, and you'll have this giant cavity of air right above it. And if, it's not your lucky day, when you pull a trigger and that primer gets hit, there's a chance that you could have a perfect little jet of flame that goes right over the top of the powder all the way up the casing and kind of settles down at the same time. And then all of that powder will detonate simultaneously. So instead of having it like an ignite an extremely rapid burn, which causes a pressure curve with the reaction, you instead get a simultaneous ignition of all of the powder, which will cause an overpressure spike, and your gun blows up. So worst case scenario, you've damaged your firearm, or well, best case scenario, you've damaged your firearm. Worst case scenario, you damage your firearm and yourself. So don't want to do that. In fact, I'm sure if you're found my tiny little obscure channel, you probably know who Kentucky Ballistics is. And I'm pretty sure that's what caused his incident a couple of years ago where he almost died because he was shooting a 50 BMG. And I'm pretty sure that's what happened with that round. I know he thought that it was, overloaded or supercharged or something like that. And I guess that technically could have been the case, but I don't think it was. I think it was actually an underloaded round, and he had a simultaneous powder detonation, and that's what caused that pressure spike that blew his gun up and almost killed him. So I shred up cotton balls and I shove those in the case to eat up that extra space, so that way the powder's compressed. So when the gun's horizontal at your shoulder or whatever, the powder's just kind of bunched up. It's not all flat. There's not a giant like oxygen cavity there, and it's going to get a more even controlled burn. And I've had good results with that. So anyways, that's what the cotton balls are for. And now, so as I've already mentioned a couple times, since the bullets are undersized, they kind of just will loosely go in there, which is not really that good for a bunch of different reasons. So what I did was I had all these cotton cleaning patches on hand, and so I grabbed one of them, set it on top of the case, set the bullet in on top of that, and then literally just tapped it in with a small hammer. So if you get like a little brass hammer, just light little taps, tap it in straight, and then when it's seated, you just take some scissors or a razor knife and cut the edge off, and you end up with this. It looks like a little 16th century Elizabethan little British person, with its frilly collar, but holds the round in there steady, no powder's coming out, and they chamber just fine and they shoot just fine. So again, the round is slightly undersized, so its accuracy isn't the greatest, but at least with the test fires at the indoor range, we did get pretty consistent results. I saved the target, but I don't have it over here, and it's honestly too big to probably put in this frame. But the every shot we took was within, I think maybe the furthest variance was 5 inches of point of aim, which with anything else isn't good, but considering that you're literally throwing a hot dog down a hallway, it's actually pretty decent accuracy. But most of them were within 2 to 3 inches of point of aim. And we only had 2 rounds that showed any evidence of keyholing, but it wasn't like a full tumble. It was just a very slight wobble, which again makes sense because the rounds are undersized, so they're not properly gripping the rifling. But it worked, and it was safe, and the gun was fine, and we were fine, and everybody had fun. So again, that's my little Kyber Pass hand loader's guide to making rounds for the Tankgewehr. So this was part 2 of the series. If and when I get to part 3, that should be covering doing this with actual 13 millimeter projectiles. And so yeah, so when I get to that point, I'll make a 3rd video in this series, and then after that it'll probably be it. So anyways, hope you enjoyed. Hope this was informative. Hope if you're able to acquire a Tankgewehr or something else that's just in a weird, obscure caliber, that this helps give you some tips and tricks that you can use to make your own ammunition without having to rely on an overly expensive or elaborate setup. So thanks for your time. Appreciate you watching. Tennis balls out.